Welcome to the Red Sneaker Podcast, your guide to success in the worlds of writing and publishing. Now, here's your host, best-selling author and founder of the Red Sneaker Writers Center, William Bernhardt.
Hello, Red Sneaker Writers. This is episode 11, going out on January 28, 2019. This podcast is for Red Sneaker writers, people who are serious about building and maintaining a writing career and want practical knowledge and advice to help them do it. My guest for this episode is R.J. Johnson, one of my favorite writers and writing buddies. He's the author of many fantasy and science fiction novels and was one of the pioneers of the independent publishing movement. But first, the news. My first news item today pertains to Amazon advertising and what appears to be a major expansion in that already huge business. We've talked about Amazon ads on previous podcasts and the importance of those ads to anybody who hopes to see their books sell on Amazon, which I think would be every Red Sneaker writer. In the previous podcast, we talked about how it now appears to be a pay or play situation, that the only way to realistically expect to draw traffic to your book pages is by taking out advertising, in which you select keywords that helps Amazon target where to place your advertising to sell more books. Well, it turns out that's just a tip of what is already a huge iceberg at Amazon. You're probably aware that they are huge in e-commerce. Amazon is now the #1 retailer in America, even bigger than Walmart. They also have a huge cloud computing business. But according to a recent article in the New York Times, Amazon's advertising business is worth about $125 billion, making it bigger than Nike, bigger than IBM. It's huge, and there's a lot more to it available to advertising agencies than what we're getting as authors. What has made them so insanely popular is Amazon's knowledge of everybody's online buying habits, or at least everybody who's got an account at Amazon, which is a lot of people. As a result of those accounts, Amazon knows what people buy. And come to think of it, they also know where people live, because you put an address with that order, right? And they know which credit cards you use. And they may know how you're feeling if you recently ordered cough syrup. And if you set up a wedding registry or a baby registry, they may know how long you've been married and to whom you're married or how old your children are. All of this information makes it easier for them to specifically target advertising where advertisers want it to go. They've provided this as an expanded self-service option for ad agencies and brands to take advantage of. How long until that becomes available to authors as well? Well, I think this points out that Amazon advertising is not only the present, but very much the future. And whether you like that or not, get used to it, because Amazon is the #1 seller of books. More than 50% of all books sold in this country are sold at Amazon. So you want your books to be doing well, and that may mean taking a dip into the waters of Amazon advertising. Second news item has to do with a fascinating study. I mean, when I first read about this, I thought it was a joke, but no, turns out it's completely legit. This is a study that comes from Australia, from their RMIT University. They've done studies on the effects of various fonts on readers, reader comprehension, and reader retention of information. Now, if you've self-published books or just work closely with your publisher, you may know already how important fonts are thought to be to the enjoyability of books. Book designers spend a lot of time choosing how the text should look. There are certain fonts, such as Arial or Garamond, that are supposedly better than others for ease of reading. Well, this Australian university has created a new typeface, which they call Sans Forgetica, in other words, without forgetting. And the idea behind this typeface is that it uses tricks to help information be lodged into the reader's brain. The whole thing draws on the psychological theory of desirable difficulty. The idea being that as readers, we learn better when we have to actively overcome some kind of obstruction. In other words, when it's not as easy to read as readers might want it to be. This is why flashcards create stronger connections in the brain and cause people to remember the information better than if you're just, say, passively studying your notes. This new typeface, Sans Forgetica, is intentionally harder to decipher, which forces the reader to focus on what they're doing. According to this study, they found that students recalled 57% of what they read in Sans Forgetica compared with only 50% of what they read in Arial, which is considered a significant difference. Have we red sneaker writers been basically barking up the wrong tree? All this time we've been selecting fonts for ease of reading and easy comprehension because we want our books to be considered fast reads, and that will get us praise and 5-star reviews on Amazon. Is it possible that we might do better if our books were a little hair short, or at least some part of it was written in a more difficult font so readers had to work a little harder? I don't know, but it is an interesting bit of research that may have ramifications in the future. At the very least, it points out, once again, just how important font selection is when you're talking about formatting books. One last news item. You've probably already heard that the famed poet Mary Oliver passed away recently. She was, according to the New York Times, the best-selling poet in America. She's won the Pulitzer Prize and about every other prize there is in the world of poetry. I have more than once heard other writers talk about her work and how inspirational it has been to them, how fundamental it has been to their attitude or personality or writing. And perhaps her poem Wild Geese is the most famous. I'm not going to read the whole thing. I don't have the rights, but I think I can get away with the first line just to let you know that this is a poem that might be important to you as a writer, called Wild Geese. You do not have to be good. You do not have to walk on your knees for 100 miles through the desert repenting. You only have to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves. I first met R.J. Johnson at the Aloha Conference in Maui many years ago. He was already well on his way publishing in the independent community, which at that time I barely knew what it was, but he was one of the forerunners doing very well with Amazon placement, Amazon ads, BookBub ads, and a lot of things that have since become commonplace in the independent book community. He's the author of a fantasy series, The 12 Stones, and a science fiction series, science fiction detective series, really, Jim Mead, Martian Detective. Both series are a lot of fun and highly recommended. Here's what RJ had to say. RJ, thanks for being on the podcast.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
All right, my traditional first question. What's the best piece of advice you would offer somebody who wants to write?
This is something that I actually tell everybody that asks me about writing. And I tell them, I feel like writing, especially in novels, books, whatever it is that you're doing in a creative sense, it's a lot like going to the gym. You do it every single day. You're going to get stronger. You're going to get more consistent. Your form is going to improve. And eventually you're going to see some pretty big results.
That's a good way of putting it. I haven't heard it that way. Do you go to the gym early in the morning or are you late at night?
No, because of my job, I'm already getting up at like 4:30 in the morning anyway.
Yikes.
Yeah. So getting up any earlier wouldn't help me, I don't think, in that matter.
How do you make yourself write at all? Because I know there are a lot of people listening to this who also have full-time jobs and are probably having a hard time finding time to write.
This is something also that I learned, and it's the power of habit, routine, and all that. On my iPhone, actually, every single day I have a little reminder pop up, a little alarm that says, all right, time to get up, go walk and write is what I title it as. So I get up, I take a walk, I think about my work in progress, and I come back, sit down on my computer and write for an hour, 2 hours, whatever time I have left for me. So I always have that daily prompt on my phone reminding me, guilting me, telling me you should be writing right now and not watching TV.
Right. Have you ever thought about dictating your work? Because then you could do it while you're writing and while you're walking, and consolidate.
My problem is, and I don't know how other people write or think, but whenever I get into the flow, I feel like it's much more kinetic. I feel much more connection when I'm actually typing it out. When I'm trying to write it, when I'm trying to talk to about it, I'll be like, Jim walked into the planetary shipyard and he saw a thing, but when I'm actually writing it out, I'll be able to get into descriptions and anything else.
That second draft, you figure out what the thing is or whatever. No, I haven't tried that either, and I doubt if I'd be very good at it, but I know some people do now and turn out perfectly creditable work.
Yeah.
Okay. Clearly you already had enough to do. Why start writing books?
Because I think it's the same reason anybody, when they think about it, will really give you. It's that you don't have a choice. If you're not writing, you kind of feel like that yearning for whatever it is. I don't need the money necessarily. I'm still going to do it because I feel like I want to see what I'm writing, on paper, on the big screen, whatever it is, because I enjoy it. And that's what I want to see out there in the culture, perhaps.
Sure.
Yeah.
And why science fiction fantasy, where your books live?
You know what? It's just because I'm a nerd. Grew up, that's really it. I grew up, all the science fiction I could consume growing up, Star Trek, Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, you name it, I was paging through it, reading it growing up. So when it was my turn, when I was old enough, I felt like I had enough experience. I figured I'd take my shot at it and maybe somebody might read my stuff someday.
Okay, let's talk about those books. First series was The 12 Stones, right?
Yeah.
5 books in that series?
Yep.
Where did that come from?
That started about 15 years ago. I was working at a hotel doing night audits, which basically means you cash out the hotel at the end of the night, and then you sit there for 8 hours. Really. And I had nothing to do. And I started I was watching, I think, a documentary on World War II, as you do. And I started thinking about what if, the Nazis really did find these kind of like crazy artifacts, that would grant people instant power. That isn't actually what my story ended up being about. But it helped provide that seed to me of like, oh, these interesting artifact stones that are sort of like wish granting, power granting type things. What would that be like for a billionaire industrialist or, a simple guy from a small mountain town? What would that do?
Would you call these fantasy novels? I think you have already.
Yeah.
But they're set in present day, right?
Right. Yeah. So, a lot of fantasy novels, they take place in a medieval times kind of thing. That's
you got some
generally
hobbits in there.
No, I got dragons. I've got, the magic of things, of the stones, because, we learn eventually where all that comes from. And turns out to be a little bit more esoteric than that. We're not going to spoil it or anything, but it is that sort of like, I feel like fantasy is the wonder of what could be, and with these wish fulfillment type stones of like, I've always wanted the power to run fast. I've always wanted the power to teleport. I've always wanted to fly, turn invisible. I felt like these things could be expressed that way in a modern day fantasy.
Cool.
Yeah.
Now you're doing the Jim Mead Martian Detective.
Yes. Yeah.
Would it be fair to say that's more in a science fiction direction?
Very. Yeah.
There's Mars, so
yeah, very much so. Yeah, and that really just stems from my love of all things space, NASA. The first book in that series actually came about because of there was a mission that the European Space Agency put out where they landed on a comet. a little tiny program